Everything about this patch was a challenge, including getting it produced, and it's still a challenge for some people to figure out which way is up on it. It's supposed to be oriented so that the shuttle is going straight up, but it almost never gets projected that way. The two constellations that you see there are Canis Major and Canis Minor. We considered it a small triumph over bureaucracy to get that through headquarters without anybody complaining about that. We wove the 69 motif in there, we think, very subtly. We were later accused of having attracted hurricanes by putting the... And we did attract quite a few. But the colors of the flag and the colors of NASA, the wake shield and the Spartan are both represented by the vaguely satellite-shaped center depiction of the astronaut symbol. And of course, we have our favorite spacecraft going up and coming down safely depicted there.
For anyone who remembers the details of the Challenger disaster, the mere mention of a problem with the O-rings on the shuttle is enough to give pause. And in fact, this past week, NASA said the rubbery rings which seal joints on the shuttle's solid rocket boosters were singed during the last two launches. If the twin O-ring seals were to burn away, it would cause what NASA calls a Crit 1 failure, meaning it would likely result in the loss of the vehicle and crew. So, while NASA says the crews on the two recent missions were not in any danger, engineers are not taking any chances either. Here's John Zarella.
The shuttle Discovery was already in space when engineers found that an O-ring seal on a booster from the shuttle Atlantis, which had just flown, was heat damaged. Now, engineers have found similar damage in one of Discovery's boosters. NASA officials say the heat spots, which are pinhead-sized, never posed any danger to the crews.
Neither one of these two cases resulted in anything like a safety problem in themselves. We need to convince ourselves that this is the worst that we're ever going to see, and understand that there's not some mechanism here or that this is some warning that it could be worse. But what we saw on these two missions was okay.
The heat-marked seals are located in the nozzle joint at the bottom of the reusable solid rocket boosters. Engineers believe the gases worked their way through a putty-like substance to reach the edge of the O-rings, but they don't understand why.
Really, right now, this is categorized as an anomaly. It's out of family, and that's our term to mean that we have not seen this exact performance before.
These are the first two incidents in 45 post-Challenger flights where gases reached O-rings. The Challenger accident was caused by a failed O-ring seal. NASA officials insist there's no similarity between what happened then and these cases. After Challenger, booster O-ring seals were extensively redesigned and tested.
Fire.
Space program watchers say the fact NASA found the problem is reassuring.
Well, at one level, I think this should give people confidence that the shuttle is being operated so that it will be safe when it's launched, that there is a safety program, quality assurance program after each launch that inspects all these items and catches problems if they exist, which wasn't happening before Challenger.
On Friday, NASA delayed the launch of Endeavour, which had been scheduled to fly on August 5th, to give engineers more time to figure out what's causing the O-ring damage.
Of the Space Shuttle Endeavour until it can correct a mysterious problem with the rocket boosters. Hot gases seem to have damaged the booster's O-rings on recent missions. While NASA says the shuttle crews were never in danger, they want to avoid any unnecessary risks. The problem has indefinitely delayed an August 5th shuttle launch date.
Den 5. August geplanten Start der Raumfähre Endeavour mindestens 2 Wochen verschoben. Ursache sind gefährliche Schäden an den Dichtungsringen im Startsystem. Die gleichen Mängel hatten 1986 zur Explosion der Challenger geführt. Damals kamen 7 Astronauten ums Leben.
The Galileo spacecraft has fired its main rocket to maneuver the craft away from Jupiter and position it for a flypast of the planet's volcanic moon, Io. Galileo was launched in 1989 to explore the solar system and is making a 2-year study of Jupiter, its largest planet. Galileo's engine will be started again in December to put the satellite into orbit around Jupiter. It's already deployed a probe, which is programmed to crash into Jupiter's dense atmosphere and send back data for about 75 minutes before being crushed by the intense pressure. Galileo will relay the probe signals back to Earth.
Into Jupiter. It's a popular site for amateur astronomers and the target of a NASA probe that will dive into the huge planet's atmosphere. We'll fall into those stories and more next. Hello and welcome. I'm Leon Harris. Miles O'Brien's on vacation this week. Anti-missile missiles are a basic tool of 20th century warfare, but they don't always work. Well, now the U.S. Air Force is considering a new kind of missile defense that's more like something from the 21st century. CNN military affairs correspondent Jamie McIntyre has our report.
Despite rave reviews during the Persian Gulf War, it turned out that Patriot missiles were virtually useless against Scuds, failing to destroy even a single warhead. In the 5 years since, Pentagon planners have been feverishly trying to come up with an anti-missile missile that works. But the most promising technology to leap off the drawing board is not a missile, but a laser, mounted on a modified Boeing 747.
This has the potential to be as major a breakthrough in this mission area as stealth and precision-guided munitions.
These Air Force tests show how advanced optics have made lasers more powerful. After just a few seconds, pressurized cylinders built to simulate missiles are destroyed. The plan is to put the multi-megawatt lasers on 747s, which would circle near the battlefield above the cloud cover. That way, the planes could destroy missiles on the way up, so that any debris, including possible chemical or biological agents, falls on enemy territory. Looks great in theory, but still not surefire technology, say critics.
Well, this is really just the latest episode of Star Wars. We've been seeing these computer animations and these laboratory experiments for over a decade now, and Star Wars still hasn't produced anything.
The Air Force says the missile-killing laser planes offer big advantages. They don't need ground support crews, the lasers are clean and can fire dozens of times without refueling, and they are relatively cheap by Pentagon standards, $450 million a plane, a quarter of the cost of a B-2 stealth bomber.
This is a good deal for the American taxpayer. It is a great combat capability, and we ought to go invest in it.
The Air Force says it's inviting critics of the airborne laser concept to help ensure the program does not become another Pentagon boondoggle. Air Force leaders are convinced a prototype of the anti-missile laser could be protecting U.S. troops on the battlefield by 2002. Jamie McIntyre, CNN, The Pentagon.
Astronomers have their eyes on a newly discovered comet that could provide a spectacular show in about a year and a half from now. It's called Comet 1995-01, or Comet Hale-Bopp, after the two people who first spotted it 3 weeks ago. It's out beyond Jupiter right now, but it's coming closer and should pass the Earth in early 1997. Astronomers think it may be one of the biggest and brightest comets we've ever seen on Earth. It'll be visible in the northern hemisphere, probably with the naked eye, and could have a tail stretching across most of the sky. But astronomers warn comets are unpredictable, and it could also turn out to be a celestial bust. We should know well ahead of time just how good this show is going to be. Well, you don't have to wait till 1997 for a good celestial display. Any clear evening at this time of year, you can see the planet Jupiter looking impressive to the naked eye and dazzling through even a small telescope. Here's Miles O'Brien with this month's look at our backyard universe.
It's been called the amateur's planet for good reason.
Jupiter with 4 moons, lots of bands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bands with granulation. Okay, looks good.
Oh, Jupiter's easy to see. It's the brightest object in the sky in the evening if the moon's not up.
It's bright because it is so big, 2.5 times the mass of all the other planets combined. It is 11 times the diameter of Earth and has by far the strongest gravitational pull. Jupiter's gravity pulled apart the famous Shoemaker-Levy 9 comet, which dove into the gaseous planet over a week-long period in July of last year. Observations of the cometary shock waves gave astronomers new insights into the mysteries of Jupiter.
By measuring the velocity of these waves, the scientists have hypothesized that the proportions of hydrogen to oxygen in the Jupiter's atmosphere is not what we expected.
Astronomers will get a chance to double-check their findings in December. That's when a probe released by the Galileo spacecraft will take a suicide dive into Jupiter's atmosphere, hurtling at more than 100,000 miles an hour. Slowed by a parachute, the probe will feed back an array of data to Galileo for more than an hour before it is crushed by Jupiter's industrial-strength atmospheric pressure. This should give researchers a first-ever glimpse beneath the ammonia clouds that constantly cover the planet.
We don't really know what the winds look like below those ammonia clouds, and we don't know how the composition might change, for example. So I'm thinking we're going to get some big surprises, and we're going to start asking ourselves some real new questions based on the probe data.
Even with the naked eye, Jupiter is easy to spot. Next to the moon, it is the brightest object in the sky right now. It should be the first star you see after sunset as you look to the south-southwest. With Backyard Universe, I'm Miles O'Brien, CNN. $1 million Lockheed launch vehicle lifted off from California's Vandenberg Air Force Base on Tuesday. But at an altitude of 92 miles, apparently beyond camera range, the rocket began fishtailing, forcing the safety officer to hit the destruct button. The two-stage rocket was carrying a private communications satellite. It was the first of 10 planned launches of a rocket design Lockheed hopes will eventually deliver payloads weighing up to a ton into low Earth orbit. NASA, of course, is also feeling the pinch, and this past week firmed up its plans to turn the shuttle over to the private sector. The U.S. Space Agency is aiming to make the switch when the Space Shuttle Endeavour lifts off on a mission to the planned International Space Station in 1998. NASA will still supply the astronauts and the launch and mission controllers, but a contractor will do the rest. Half the 2,800 NASA employees assigned to the shuttle will lose their jobs. NASA says the privatization plan should save taxpayers about $1 billion a year. Orbiting a few hundred miles above the Earth, a space shuttle never gets beyond the shores of the vast ocean that is the universe. One of the best places to explore the outer reaches of space is right here on terra firma, in New Mexico to be precise, at a telescope which isn't like any other. You might say it's tuned into Cosmos Radio. Don Knapp offers a tour of the station and a look at some of its greatest hits.
In the quiet of the high desert plains of San Agustin, New Mexico, giant ears listen to the violent turmoil of the universe.
They're distant galaxies with active explosions and other strange things going on, and that's what the radio sky looks like.
Computers position 27 massive radio telescopes along 28 miles of railroad tracks. They call it the Very Large Array. The dishes tune in natural radio frequencies generated by hot gases of outer space and the thermonuclear energy of collapsing stars. A special computer processes the signals and paints images of the skies human eyes could not otherwise see.
This is a picture of Mars if you could look through radar eyes.
Brian Butley used the powerful Goldstone telescope in Southern California to beam radar signals out to Mars. He collected the signals that bounced back with a Very Large Array in New Mexico and studied a mysterious dark spot.
This is Stealth here, which extends just west from the Tharsis volcanoes, which are here.
So called because radar signals just seem to disappear. Butley reasons it's probably Martian volcanic ash. Astronomers want to look even deeper into the universe. For that, they turn to the Very Long Baseline Array, a computer-linked system of 10 radio telescopes stretched over 5,000 miles. Last year, the VLBA produced these images, believed to be giant jets of matter shooting into space at very nearly the speed of light, from a system only 10,000 light-years away from our solar system, practically our backyard, as astronomers tell it, close enough to also observe with optical telescopes.
We have optical measurements, and we know that this 3 solar mass thing, whatever it is not that bright. And we know that it has to be very small from various other arguments. So the only thing that can be that massive and that dim is a black hole.
Perhaps the first direct observation ever of a black hole, through the ears of a radio telescope. Don Knapp, CNN, reporting.
The underlying goals of all that effort are lofty, to say the least. Astronomers hope the VLA will help them get a firm fix on the age and the size of the universe.
Schon in den frühen Morgenstunden bildeten sich lange Schlangen vor dem Festivalkino in Venedig. Alle wollten Apollo 13, den neuen Streifen von Tom Hanks, sehen. Gegen Mittag erschien dann der Hollywood-Star selbst auf dem Lido, um den Kinostart seines Astronautenfilms zu präsentieren. Die Story ist nach den wirklichen Geschehnissen der Apollo 13-Mission gedreht worden. Die Astronauten überlebten damals nur um Haaresbreite die Katastrophe. Ich wollte die Rolle, weil viel mehr Dramatik und Ironie bei Apollo 13 drinsteckt, als bei den Flügen davor und danach bei Apollo 11 bis Apollo 17. Tom Hanks wieder mal in einem großen Unterhaltungsfilm, der bestimmt an der Kinokasse Erfolg haben wird. Auch den Journalisten in Venedig hat der Streifen heute Morgen gefallen. Sehr nett, ganz toll, war echt gut. Der Film ist sehr gut gemacht. Die Schauspieler sind alle klasse. Venedig feiert heute Tom Hanks als nervenstarken und mutigen Astronauten und als sympathischen Schauspieler.
We begin with a story of lasers in space. And we're not talking about Star Wars. We're talking about a natural laser. It was found deep in space by a high-flying telescope which is on its way to retirement. This final discovery from NASA's Kuiper Airborne Observatory may help astronomers learn more about how young stars are formed. Don Knapp scoped out the finding scientists worried it may be the end of the line for their flights of fancy.
Scientists aboard NASA's Flying Kuiper Observatory found what they had been looking for, a naturally occurring laser in outer space. Their existence had been predicted 15 years ago.
This star here is the star where we detected the first amplifier of infrared radiation in the big universe.
The laser is generated inside a massive disk of hydrogen gas that surrounds a young, very hot and luminous star about 4,000 light-years from Earth. Infrared rays of light passing through the disk pick up energy from ionized hydrogen atoms and are amplified.
A laser is driven or pumped, as we say, by the starlight. The star, what it does is it ionizes the hydrogen. The laser is a mechanism of amplification of light, which requires that the atoms or molecules which are producing the amplification all be at roughly the same velocity, and that's what this disk does for us.
Scientists using ground-based radio telescopes had already found masers in the outer part of the star's gas cloud disk. Masers, like lasers, amplify light, but in the lower microwave range. Dr. Charles Towns invented the first man-made maser back in the 50s and won a Nobel Prize for his work.
Masers and now lasers being found in space reminds one that they were there all the time, billions of years. We didn't have them on Earth. If we'd looked up there earlier, then we would have had them sooner.
Scientists found the natural laser with the only instrument capable of seeing it, an infrared radio telescope coupled to a special spectrometer mounted on board NASA's C-141 Kuiper Airborne Observatory. NASA announced the laser discovery on the eve of the 21-year-old airplane's retirement, and as a $250 million appropriation for its replacement waits for Senate approval. There's concern budget cutters could kill NASA's plans to purchase a used Boeing 747 and equip it with a larger telescope. But scientists say they need an airborne telescope to study such things as circumstellar disks because atmospheric moisture absorbs certain wavelengths.
It is also important because such disks can be some models of what happened in our solar system many years ago to produce planetary system.
Scientists say they can measure velocities, distances, densities, and other conditions of distant objects using natural lasers, as long as they have an instrument that can see them. Don Knapp, CNN, Mountain View, California.
Trouble and delays have focused like a laser beam on the Space Shuttle Endeavour. Already delayed a month by a bulky booster rocket and an incoming hurricane, the launch of Endeavour was postponed again this week by an overheated fuel cell. Fuel cells convert hydrogen and oxygen into electrical power on the orbiter. One of them, there are 3 in all, overheated as NASA was preparing the shuttle for a Thursday morning launch. NASA says it will take a week to replace the fuel cell while Endeavour sits on the launch pad. The shuttle is slated to conduct an 11-day science mission. Galileo's long mission to Jupiter is not in jeopardy despite a stuck valve. This according to scientists at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. The valve is part of a system of rockets that keeps the spacecraft on course. The stuck valve is designed to keep vapors from the chemicals that cause the rockets to fire from mixing prematurely. But scientists say they can control the vapors by cooling down the tanks that hold the chemical propellant. A probe, which already separated from Galileo, should enter the atmosphere of Jupiter on December 7th. And as easy as en deux, trois, a European Ariane rocket found itself hurtling from French Guiana into orbit to release a communications satellite this past week. It's the 77th successful launch of an Ariane rocket, the 7th this year.
Lightning as it occurs in nature is a spectacular sight. Trying to study it can be hit or miss. Using rockets and a bit of copper wire, an international group of scientists at the University of Florida has found a way to coach Mother Nature into lighting up the sky. Here's the rocket in action. Since that took only 2 seconds, here it is again in slow motion. Lightning strikes 100 times a second worldwide. Last year in the United States, lightning struck 30 million times. When it does strike, it can reach temperatures of 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Researchers not only want to study the physics of lightning, but they also are looking for better ways to protect electronics from lightning strikes. On 80 acres at a Central Florida Army base, scientists study the effects of power surges caused by lightning at a simulated home. At airports, researchers say the right kind of equipment could have prevented lightning from knocking out radar, as it did recently at Miami International Airport.
One can protect if one wants to spend enough money against lightning. Whether one spends that money is another issue, and if one's building to the lowest bid, very often that protection isn't done well.
It started here.
Scientists are also documenting so-called fulgurites, crystallized lightning formed when it bores a hole into the ground.
When it contracts to re-solidify, it does so in this strange shape.
And it's actually a piece of hardened lightning.
It's a sort of a lightning track in the ground.
In the United States alone, lightning kills about 200 people a year. Reason enough to learn all we can about it. Susan Candiotti, CNN, Gainesville, Florida.
6 weeks after engineers found a potentially hazardous flaw in the space shuttle's solid rocket boosters, NASA has issued a seal of approval to fly again. The Shuttle Endeavour will be the first to use improved seals in joints at the base of the engines.
Hey, we had a problem, and we weren't forced to go fly with a problem. We stood down. We stopped flying, and we weren't going to fly until it was fixed properly.
NASA discovered the problem after inspecting boosters used in the last 2 shuttle missions. Tiny air bubbles in the putty which seals the joints allowed hot exhaust to reach, then singe O-rings. Exhaust leaking from an O-ring higher up the booster stack caused the 1986 Challenger accident, so NASA was not taking any chances. Engineers are now using a vacuum system to pump out excess air as the putty is pumped in.
So there's not a chance of this hot gas getting down to where the O-ring was.
Once aloft, the 5-man crew of Endeavour faces a busy, complex mission of nearly 11 days.
I'm not going to descend into Forrest Gumpisms here, but I will say that it is a Whitman sampler of science.
On Flight Day 2, they will release the Spartan scientific satellite. While floating free from the shuttle, it should gather information about the sun's corona and analyze the blast of atomic particles which the sun sends through the solar system, the so-called solar wind, which can disrupt satellite communications here on Earth.
With satellites like the Spartan, we'll have a better description of the solar wind and its relationship to Earth, and that'll help us better design communication satellites.
Midway through the mission, the astronauts will release another free-floating craft called the Wake Shield Facility. Shaped like a Frisbee, the device is designed to create a super pure, super strong vacuum.
As it goes through space, imagine a boat going through a lake. As it goes through, it sort of hits all of the very thin atmosphere that is there and knocks all those particles out of the way.
In that void, researchers hope to produce exotic semiconductors which cannot be made on Earth. They see it as a forerunner for commercial manufacturing in space.
At the end of Endeavour's mission, astronauts Jim Voss and Mike Gernhardt will take a 6-hour walk in space to test tools, techniques, and hardware which might be used to build the International Space Station. They will also try out some new spacesuits with improved thermal protection, including heated gloves. The astronauts admit they have their work cut out for them on this mission.
This is really a lean and mean, re-engineered kind of program where every possible ounce is being extracted from the flight time we've got.
Mission Commander Dave Walker says he'll be happy if they finish 80% of their chores. Miles O'Brien, CNN, reporting.
Ein extrem starker Hurrikan wühlt zurzeit den Atlantik auf, Hurrikan Louis. Hier liegt er, hier haben Sie Südamerika, Kuba und Jamaika und dann Florida mit Nordamerika. Es ist ein sehr starker mit Sturmböen bis zu 270 Kilometer in der Stunde. Und er wird heute Nacht dann hier über die kleinen Antillen voraussichtlich ziehen und schwerste Schäden anrichten. Kommen wir nochmal zurück zum Hurrikan Louis. Er wird inzwischen verglichen mit dem Hurrikan Hugo von 1989, der damals über Jamaika hinweg und Florida schwerste Schäden angerichtet hat. Im Moment sieht es so aus, er ist schon 14 Tage da am Wirken auf dem Atlantik, dass er Richtung Westen zieht. Man sieht das ist das Bild von gestern Nachmittag, aber er ist dann im Laufe des Tages immer weiter Richtung Westen gezogen und in den letzten 18 Stunden dann etwa 400 Kilometer weit. Er wird also etwa am Tag 400 Kilometer weit Richtung Westen ziehen. Es wird befürchtet, dass er auf der Insel Martinique am Mount Pelée da durch den starken Regen auch Schlammlawinen auslösen wird. Das war's. Ihnen einen schönen Abend und bis morgen. Liegt da, Sie sehen hier Puerto Rico, Kuba, Nordamerika. Er ist inzwischen schon über die kleinen Antillen hier gezogen, über Guadeloupe mit Windgeschwindigkeiten bis zu 150 Kilometer in der Stunde. Sehr gut zu sehen, hier das Auge des Hurrikans. Er bewegt sich auf Puerto Rico zu, aber es sieht so aus, dass er doch ein bisschen noch die Kurve kriegt. Er wird nach Nordwesten ausbüchsen hier sozusagen und dann nur den Nordosten streifen.
Heavy rains and high winds lashed the islands of Guadeloupe and Montserrat early Tuesday. Hurricane warnings remain in effect from Dominica to Puerto Rico. Luis is bearing down on the island of Antigua, and earlier CNN's Jill Doherty spoke with Glenn Young. He's a hotel manager on the island of Antigua. He described conditions there.
At the moment, we're under the influence of the hurricane. It is as devastating as was pointed out. If you can imagine winds stripping the bark off trees, you can begin to imagine what is happening. We are personally safe in our hotel, and our guests are safe, and we have taken in residents from the island and from other hotels, and we are relatively safe in our area. But
has it passed
as
over?
one looks out, one can see signs of massive devastation.
And has it actually passed over your hotel already?
Absolutely not. The fact that you can get to us by telephone is in itself a minor miracle. We are definitely under the influence right at this moment.
How fast would you say the wind is going at this point?
They say 146. I would say it's probably gusting at least another 25 miles an hour.
It all depends on the weather. You can see live pictures of that launch, which has already been delayed by a month due to technical problems. Well, now NASA engineers say that possible thunderstorms could scrub the takeoff, which is scheduled to take place in less than an hour. The launch did manage to escape the fury of Hurricane Luis, which now headed away from the Florida launch site.
Launch delayed by more than a month by technical problems. It is the 71st mission for the shuttle program. Commander David Walker and his 4 crew members plan to release and then retrieve 2 satellites during 11 days in Earth orbit.
4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Endeavour on the 71st flight of the Space Shuttle on a multifaceted mission.
Houston now controlling the flight of Endeavour.
Roger, roll, Endeavour.
Endeavour completes the roll to place the shuttle in heads downwind rudder position for the 8.5 minute round of 25 seconds into the flight, Endeavour's 3 liquid fuel main engines begin to throttle back in a 2-step fashion to 67% of rated performance. That will dampen the stress on the shuttle's aero surfaces as it breaks through the sound barrier. 35 seconds into the flight, Endeavour passes through the sound barrier. The main engines beginning to rev back up to full throttle. All of the engines performing normally, along with Endeavour's 3 power-producing fuel cells and 3 hydraulic power units.
Endeavour, go at throttle up.
Endeavour, Roger, go at throttle up.
Throttle up call acknowledged by Commander Dave Walker. He's joined on the flight deck by pilot Ken Cockrell, flight engineer Jim Newman, and payload commander Jim Voss, mission specialist Mike Gernhardt, seated alone down on the middeck. 1 minute 35 seconds into the flight. Endeavour more than 88,000 feet in altitude, traveling more than 3,000 feet per second, already 13 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center on a due east trajectory. 1 minute 50 seconds into the flight, 15 seconds away from solid rocket booster separation. That will be confirmed by the booster officer here in Mission Control. Endeavour now 155,000 feet in altitude, more than 26.5 miles downrange. Booster officer confirms a good solid rocket booster separation.
Endeavour, performance nominal.
What appears to be a flawless beginning for an 11-day science mission by the Shuttle Endeavour and its 5-person crew.
1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Endeavour on the 71st flight of the Space Shuttle on a multifaceted mission.
Houston now controlling the flight of Endeavour.
Roger, roll, Endeavour.
Endeavour completes the roll to place the shuttle in touchdown wings orbit position. 25 seconds into the flight, Endeavour's 3 liquid fuel main.
Nach 2 verschobenen Versuchen hob die Endeavour pünktlich um 11:09 Uhr Ortszeit vom Raumfahrtgelände Cape Canaveral in Florida ab. In den vergangenen Wochen hatten technische Schwierigkeiten den ursprünglich für den 5. August geplanten Start der Endeavour verzögert. Die Raumfähre mit 5 Astronauten an Bord soll 11 Tage im All bleiben. Bis zum Schluss hatte die NASA befürchtet, den Start wegen des Hurrikans Louis ein weiteres Mal verschieben zu müssen.
1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Endeavour on the 71st.
After more than a month's delay, Space Shuttle Endeavour blasted off from Florida about an hour ago. The launch delay was caused by worries about critical seals and an overheated power generator. While in orbit, the 5 astronauts will release and then retrieve 2 satellites. A spacewalk's also planned for the 11-day flight.
Einen kleinen Besuch abstatten. Verwüstung hat er ja nun inzwischen genügend angerichtet. Hier zog er über die kleinen Antillen und die Karibikinseln. Nun scheint er sich aber eines Besseren zu besinnen und zieht Richtung Atlantik nach Norden bzw. Nordwesten. Dort erwartet ihn kühleres Wasser und so hoffen wir, dann wird er sich auch schnell abschwächen. Ihnen noch einen schönen Abend.
Hurricane Center in the U.S. says Bermuda residents should keep a close eye on the storm, and heavy surf advisories are in effect for much of the U.S. East Coast. Louise killed at least 13 people as it rampaged through eastern Caribbean islands. Turning now to dog crew, he's finally up.
3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Endeavour on the 71st flight of the Space Shuttle on a...
Once in orbit, the 5-man crew plans to release and then retrieve 2 science satellites and later take a walk in space. Endeavour is scheduled to return to Earth September 18th. It has a memorable nickname for its astronauts aboard this time, but just to be clear, there really are no dogs aboard.
It's perhaps the most celebrated and most debated UFO encounter of all time. A flying saucer and its extraterrestrial pilot crashed in the desert just outside of Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. Or was it the wreckage of a downed weather balloon? One thing for sure, Roswell is making the most out of this mystery, as Greg Lamont reports.
Stardate, early July, 1947. Destination, planet Earth. There's a report of a downed alien spacecraft in the small community of Roswell, New Mexico. Walter Hott was told by his military commander to issue the following press release.
We have in our possession
a flying disc. I believe that in the article itself, it refers to it as a flying disc rather than a flying saucer.
News of the alien spacecraft hit the front pages. These are purported to be photographs from a film that just surfaced this year, taken by the military, of autopsies performed on alien bodies, allegedly discovered near the crash site. But within hours of the alleged UFO encounter, higher authorities in the military issued another news release saying it was an experimental weather balloon.
When the general says it was a weather balloon in 1947, it was a weather balloon.
What do you think it was today?
Today, I think it was something extraterrestrial.
It became known as the Roswell cover-up and was the basis for the 1994 Showtime movie entitled Roswell.
The Roswell incident, if you're interested in the subject of flying saucers, it's the only time in history that the military made a statement in which they said they'd actually captured one.
The military has never since officially acknowledged direct contact with a UFO. But that hasn't stopped Roswell from making contact with thousands of new visitors from distant locations. In July, Roswell held its first annual UFO Encounter Festival and drew as many as 11,000 visitors.
Whether there's a cover-up or not, I don't know, but I think they're possible. Definitely possible.
This girl is a bit more pragmatic.
Well, I think of UFOs like as unidentified flying objects.
Fact is, Roswell may well be the UFO capital of the world, boasting not one, but 2 museums on the subject. One of them, a converted video store.
Locally, you know, a lot of people made fun of us, kind of treated us like we had the disease. They didn't want to get too close. A lot of prank phone calls and stuff like that. And so, wasn't a whole lot of support here, no.
But when the Earthlings started seeing this, watch out. Where else can you get galaxy juices or Pluto pups or alien dolls?
Anything's possible these days.
Visitors are treated to photographs purported to show actual sightings of UFOs. There's a mock autopsy room where the alleged aliens from 1947 were said to have been taken. And then there's the replica of the alleged crash.
What do you think about the alien back there?
If you're thinking Roswell may have gone a bit close encounter crazy,
odd,
maybe so. But let's face it, green is green, right? Greg Lamont, CNN, reporting.
Our encounter is over for this week. Thanks for watching. I'm Donna Kelly.
Ja, nochmal zum Hurricane Louis. Der hat inzwischen eine nördliche Bahn eingeschlagen. Das heißt, gestern lag er noch hier. Inzwischen sein Zentrum hier an diesem Kreuzchen. Das ist einfach nur eine geografische Koordinate. Und in den letzten Stunden noch ein bisschen weiter. Es sieht aber so aus, als könnte er doch die amerikanische Küste erreichen. Also zwischen Virginia und Connecticut ist es noch nicht raus, was passiert. In dieser Nacht wird er auf jeden Fall erstmal Bermuda Island hier passieren. Die Windgeschwindigkeiten immer noch sehr hoch, bis zu 180 Kilometer in der Stunde. Das war's. Ihnen noch einen schönen Sonntag.
Der deutsche Astronaut Reinhard Furrer ist beim Absturz eines Privatflugzeuges ums Leben gekommen. Der 54-Jährige hatte in Berlin an einer Oldtimer-Flugschau teilgenommen. Die Propellermaschine, in der Furrer saß, stürzte kurz nach dem Start auf das Rollfeld. Dabei starb auch der Pilot. Furrer war 1985 mit der amerikanischen Raumfähre Challenger ins All geflogen.
8 zerschellt auf dem Flugplatz in Berlin-Johannisthal. Die Oldtimer-Flugschau war gerade zu Ende gegangen, als Reinhard Furrer und sein Pilot noch eine Platzrunde drehten. Die einmotorige Militärmaschine stürzte direkt auf das Rollfeld und ging in Flammen auf. Furrer und sein Pilot waren sofort tot. Die Kriminalpolizei nahm die Ermittlungen auf. Die Ursache ist noch völlig unklar. Reinhard Furrer war der 3. Deutsche im All. Vor 10 Jahren startete er mit der amerikanischen Raumfähre Challenger zur Spacelab-Mission D1. Sie ging als erste rein deutsche Versuchsreihe in die Weltraumgeschichte ein.
Reinhard Furrer ist tot. Der 54-Jährige verunglückte am Rande einer Flugschau in Berlin. Furrer hatte sich an Bord einer historischen Militärmaschine befunden. Etwa 10 Minuten nach dem Start stürzte die Messerschmitt aus dem Jahr 1994 in die Tiefe. Der Pilot ist ebenfalls tot. Nach inoffiziellen Angaben stürzte die Maschine wegen eines Flugfehlers ab. Furrer hatte vor 10 Jahren an der amerikanisch-europäischen Space Lab-Mission teilgenommen.
Als er 1985 mit der amerikanischen Raumfähre Challenger ins Weltall startete. Reinhard Furrer. Heute Abend ist er beim Absturz eines Oldtimer-Militärflugzeuges in Berlin ums Leben gekommen. Er wurde 54 Jahre alt. Ein Bericht von Hans-Joachim Lorenz.
Die Veranstaltung auf dem stillgelegten Flughafen in Berlin-Johannisthal war fast zu Ende, als diese einmotorige Maschine vom Typ Messerschmitt 185 zu einer Flugrolle ansetzte, auf den Boden schlug und explodierte. Der Pilot kam ebenso ums Leben wie Reinhard Furrer. Der 54-jährige Astronaut war vor 10 Jahren mit der amerikanischen Raumfähre Challenger im All. Seitdem war er ein gefragter Fachmann, leitete in Berlin das Institut für Weltraumforschung an der Freien Universität. Der Fliegerei blieb er verbunden. Seine Leidenschaft für die kleinen Privatflugzeuge kostete ihn heute das Leben. Zuschauer wurden glücklicherweise nicht verletzt. Das gesamte Gelände wurde von der Polizei abgesperrt. Eine Stellungnahme gibt es nur vom Veranstalter.
Die Ursache wird durch das Luftfahrtbundesamt ermittelt. Wir können hier weder vorgreifen noch gegenwärtig Ursachen darlegen. Der Pilot des Flugzeuges, Herr Kademann, war ein außerordentlich erfahrener Pilot auf der Me 108. Der zweite Tote ist der Präsident der OPA, der Astronaut Herr Professor Furrer.
Auf dem Gelände der Luftversuchsanstalt Johannisthal fand seit Freitag eine Oldtimer-Flugschau statt mit Maschinen aus der ersten Hälfte dieses Jahrhunderts.
Amateur astronomers need not rely on gold-plated space gear to appreciate the finer points of the object that puts the solar in our solar system. You can spot some of the sun's more interesting spots right from your backyard. In some ways, solar astronomy can be easy. After all, the sun is hard to miss, and you don't have to worry about light pollution. But there are still some obstacles.
Well, here comes that cloud again.
And solar observing should not be taken lightly. Never, never look at the sun through an unfiltered telescope. Solar filters are a must. Or you can project an image and watch the sun indirectly. Whatever your viewing scheme, there should be plenty to look at on the sun's surface. In the next few years, it will follow an 11-year cycle, going from quiet to active and back to quiet. It's just starting into a new burst of activity, marked by the discovery last month of the first sunspot in the new cycle.
A sunspot is a region of lower temperature. They're not really black, it's just a relative effect, where they're up to 1,000 degrees colder than the rest of the sun.
There's a sunspot just left of center. It's a little black spot.
Sunspots often have solar flares above them, which can disrupt radio communications here on Earth. Flares also cause auroras, the so-called northern and southern lights. And while you may watch the solar sights through telescope filters or projected on screens, the pros have a number of their own sun-watching missions in the works. For instance, the Ulysses spacecraft, launched in 1990, is cruising near the North Pole of the sun. It is studying the sun's magnetic fields, radiation, and the atomic particles it emits, called the solar wind. The Spartan satellite aboard the current shuttle mission is designed to gather additional data on the solar wind, which will be compared with the readings taken at the same time by Ulysses. Ulysses should make another pass around the sun in about 6 years, when sunspot activity will be at a maximum.
So we will have an opportunity to look at the sun's behavior and measure the particles and fields and the composition of the particles at 2 times, when the sunspots are in their low phase and when the sunspots are at their peak phase.
Whatever its phase, astronomers say viewing the sun can be very rewarding. After all, there is no star more important to our home in the galaxy. Safely catching a close-up glimpse should be worth the extra effort.
Powerful storms of the century as it hovered off the coast of North America. At last report, Hurricane Louise was 400 kilometers off Bermuda. It was moving in a northeast direction and further out to sea.
Mindestens 14 Menschen durch den Wirbelsturm getötet worden. Auf der Karibikinsel Saint-Martin werden noch Einwohner vermisst. Viele von ihnen hatten sich auf Yachten und Hausbooten entlang der Küste aufgehalten. Die Insel ist eines der am schwersten vom Sturm betroffenen Gebiete. Meteorologen haben hier Windgeschwindigkeiten von bis zu 210 Kilometern pro Stunde gemessen. Fast 3 Meter hohe Wellen trafen auf die Küste. Hunderte Menschen wurden obdachlos.
Shuttle Endeavour is to use a robotic arm to retrieve a science satellite. The astronauts released the Spartan satellite Friday to collect data on solar wind. That phenomenon disrupts radio and satellite communications here on Earth. Endeavour's astronauts are on an 11-day mission. That's all. Coming up next. With the help of a robotic arm, it's back in. We'll explain what it is.
This is Mission Control Houston, payload bay cameras and the Shuttle Endeavour showing the Spartan satellite now being gently lowered.
Houston, for Cujo, we copied your last about the...
And with that, astronauts of the Space Shuttle Endeavour accomplished another primary mission goal on their 4th day in orbit. The crew used the shuttle's robotic arm to haul the Spartan satellite into the shuttle's cargo bay. The science satellite was released into space Friday to collect data on solar wind. The Shuttle Endeavour is on an 11-day mission in space.
Satellit Spartan ist heute wieder erfolgreich an Bord der amerikanischen Raumfähre Endeavour aufgenommen worden. Die Bergung mit dem Greifarm hatte sich zunächst verzögert, da der Satellit nicht in der richtigen Position stand. Spartan war vor 2 Tagen ausgesetzt worden, um die Sonnenatmosphäre zu erforschen. In den kommenden 5 Tagen stehen noch mehrere medizinische Experimente und ein 6-stündiger Raumspaziergang auf dem Programm der Besatzung.
Er flog bis in den Weltraum. Reinhard Furrer kannte sich mit komplizierter Technik aus. Jetzt stürzte er ab. Doch nicht bei einer Weltraumexpedition, sondern bei einer kleinen Spritztour. Tödliches Abenteuer. Heute in Explosiv. Er kannte keine Grenzen. Reinhard Furrer flog sogar ins Weltall. Doch sein Hobby waren kleine Abenteuer. Kunstflüge im Zweisitzer machten ihm Spaß, bis er abstürzte. Der Tod des Himmelstürmers. Jetzt in Explosiv.
Der Mann, der für Deutschland im Weltraum war, kommt ausgerechnet bei einem Flugzeugabsturz ums Leben. Reinhard Furrer, 54 Jahre alt, vor 10 Jahren flog er mit der D1-Mission ins All. Er galt als einer der besten Weltraumexperten Deutschlands, aber er war auch ein Abenteurer, als Hochseesegler und als Pilot kleinerer Sportmaschinen. Schon einmal war Furrer mit einem kleinen Flugzeug abgestürzt. Der letzte Crash am Samstag endete tödlich. Thomas Rings mit Einzelheiten.
Um 18:16 Uhr, genau 1 Minute nach dem tragischen Absturz in Berlin, erhält Dieter Pade die Nachricht vom Tod seines Freundes. Reinhard Furrer, Astronaut und passionierter Flieger, sein Leben endete in der Luft.
Sie können sich vorstellen, das war ein großer Schock für mich, weil der Professor Dr. Reinhard Furrer ein wesentlicher Ratgeber für mich war. Er war ein begeisterter und begnadeter Pilot. Er war von allen Dingen fasziniert, die die Luftfahrt betrafen.
Samstagabend, nach einer Flugschau auf dem Flugplatz Berlin-Johannisthal, besteigen Reinhard Furrer und sein Flugkollege Gerd Kaldemann eine 50 Jahre alte Messerschmitt 108. Sie wollen noch privat ein paar Runden über dem Flugplatz drehen, doch kurz nach dem Start geschieht der tragische Unfall. Die beiden Piloten versuchen ein riskantes Flugmanöver, doch sie bekommen die Maschine nicht mehr hoch. Reinhard Furrer und Gerd Kaldemann stürzen in die Tiefe, das Flugzeug geht sofort in Flammen auf. Reinhard Furrer und sein Kollege werden hinausgeschleudert. Einheiten der Feuerwehr sind sofort am Unglücksort, doch für die beiden Piloten kommt jede Hilfe zu spät. Wie es zu dem Absturz kommen konnte, ist bislang unklar. Auch weiß man nicht, wer der beiden die Maschine geflogen hat. Möglicherweise Furrer selbst, und der galt als waghalsiger Flieger. Februar 1990, bei einem Flugversuch auf dem Flughafen Kassel, kommt es zu einer Bruchlandung. Der Physiker und seine 3 Passagiere werden leicht verletzt. Furrer war damals mit vereisten Tragflächen gestartet. Ein Gericht verurteilt ihn. Furrer kommt mit einer Geldstrafe davon. Reinhard Furrer, ein Astronaut und abenteuerlustiger Flieger. 1985 ist er der 3. Deutsche im All. Nach seiner Teilnahme an der D1 Space Lab Mission auf der US-Raumfähre Challenger erhält er das Bundesverdienstkreuz.
Ich glaube, dass ein Mann, der im All gewesen ist und damit ein hohes Risikobewusstsein mitgebracht haben muss, sonst wäre er nicht ausgewählt worden für diese Mission, das nicht auch in der kleinen Luftfahrt gezeigt hat. Ich bin davon überzeugt, dass er immer genau wusste, was er tat und warum er es machte, was nicht bedeutet, dass die Natur manchmal auch stärker sein kann als der betreffende Pilot, der dieses Luftfahrzeug dann fliegt.
Bei dem Absturz der alten Maschine war die Natur stärker. Die beiden Piloten haben sie mit ihren Kunststücken herausgefordert und haben mit dem Leben bezahlt. Der Absturz geschah 150 Meter von der Publikumstribüne entfernt. Die etwa 200 noch anwesenden Zuschauer haben nicht mit einem Unglück gerechnet.
Meine Frau ist anderer Meinung, die ist nicht mitgekommen und sagt, um Gottes Willen, da könnte was passieren. Ich gehe prinzipiell nicht zu sowas, aber ich finde doch, der Reiz ist unbestritten. Ja. Es ist, wer da technisch und historisch interessiert ist, kommt da nicht vorbei.
Wir haben eigentlich damit gerechnet, dass wir uns das nur noch am Boden ansehen, aber dass die hier nur fliegen, finde ich irgendwie nicht okay. Ja, die Leute wollen natürlich Sensation haben, nicht? Aber wenn man die am Boden sieht, hätte es auch gereicht für heute, finde ich.
In den kommenden Tagen wollen Kriminalpolizei und Bundesluftfahrtsamt die genaue Absturzursache klären. Ob Reinhard Furrer oder seinem Kollegen ein Pilotenfehler unterlaufen ist, ob die Situation falsch eingeschätzt wurde, wird sich kaum klären lassen.
Man ist erschüttert, weil mit 55 Jahren es auch einfach man als Mensch zu jung ist, um auf eine so tragische Art ja, zu Tode zu kommen. Auf der anderen Seite glaube ich, dass er ein sehr erfülltes fliegerisches Leben gehabt hat. Er hat alles erreicht, was ein Flieger sich wünschen könnte. Er hat die Erde von oben gesehen, er war begeistert. Er hat mir das jetzt noch in Japan erzählt, mit welcher Begeisterung und diese Empfindung er hatte. Und er war einfach ein überzeugter Pilot.
Tuesday, the Wake Shield satellite, as it's known, overheated, actually flipped once and had to be shut down. Now that it's cooled off, scientists have tried to resume experiments, but the satellite instruments have failed to respond properly. The craft is trying to manufacture 7 high-quality semiconductor wafers, which could ultimately lead, if it works, to faster computers.
To North America, where we have scattered rain showers here from the southwestern United States. This low, the remnants of what was once upon a time Hurricane Ismail, producing precipitation here in the U.S. In South America and here in the tropics, another hurricane, this one Marilyn, expected by this time to be moving up through the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, top wind speeds there at about 85 knots.
Vierte Wirbelsturm, der die Karibik innerhalb eines Monats heimsucht. Der Hurrikan fegt mit einer Windgeschwindigkeit von bis zu 200 Kilometern pro Stunde über die Hauptstadt San Juan hinweg, begleitet von heftigen Regenfällen. Nach Ansicht von Experten wird Marilyn weiter an Stärke zunehmen. Geschäfte und Schulen in San Juan bleiben vorerst geschlossen. Die Behörden setzen ein.
Hurricane Marilyn moves away from the Caribbean after leaving a path of destruction. And also, live pictures from space from the Space Shuttle Endeavour, where 2 astronauts right now are in a spacewalk. Stay with us. Super Typhoon Oscar, called the most powerful storm in half a century by Japanese meteorologists, is now about 800 kilometers south of Tokyo, heading north and expected to accelerate. Winds are already close to 200 kilometers per hour. Forecasters say Oscar will hit the Tokyo area late Saturday or early Sunday. Heavy rain already has pelted eastern central Japan, and strong wind is also sweeping through south central Japan and whipped up waves in the coastal areas. Meanwhile, Hurricane Marilyn beat down on Puerto Rico Saturday, sending 11,000 people into shelters and wrecking several hundred homes. Earlier, anxious residents barricaded their homes by nailing windows and shutting doors as winds picked up. The Virgin Islands were not spared from Marilyn's fury either. St. Croix got hit with at least 160 km/h winds on Friday. We talked with charter captain Hank Densler, who was there.
Well, I think it's without question St. Croix has received the most devastating hit from this storm. The eye passed over St. Croix at about 5:30 yesterday evening. We know the roof on the hospital of St. Croix was blown away. We've heard they had gusts of approximately 130 knots, tremendous sustained winds and seas. Beyond that, you know, we heard a very dramatic radio call from a man whose house came down around him who was calling VI radio for help. And, of course, there was simply no way, you know, you could get any help to the man until after the storm subsided.
Marilyn is now moving away gradually from the Caribbean. It's starting to head northwest with winds of about 175 kilometers per hour. We'll have a full, up-to-date weather forecast for you later in the show. World News: astronauts walk in space, checking out new gear designed to keep them warm. We'll be joined by CNN's Miles O'Brien to tell us what it's all about. Right now, 2 astronauts on board the U.S. Space Shuttle Endeavour taking a long walk in space in the extreme cold. But we're joined now by CNN science correspondent Miles O'Brien to tell us about it. What are they doing, Miles?
Well, Sonia, it's cleanup time in space. They've had a good 6 hours of work. It's time to clean up and get back aboard. Earlier, we were able to see Jim Voss at the end of the shuttle's remote-controlled arm. He was learning just how cold space can be. You're looking at a live picture there right now. I believe that is Jim Voss there right now. If you look on his wrist, he has what appears to be an LCD screen there. That is an electronic checklist, which is one of the many things which the astronauts have been checking out on this 6-hour spacewalk outside the Space Shuttle Endeavour. As I say, they should be headed back into that airlock anytime soon now. The spacesuits, which are a $10 million item, have been outfitted with new underwear and socks, and that they also have some gloves which have little heaters. For the first time, an astronaut can turn off the cooling system of his suit, too. So if it's getting too cold out there in space, they'll be okay. And so far, no signs of any shivers. In the comparative warmth of the payload bay, Mike Gernhardt spent the last couple of hours at work at a station using tools and bracing devices and equipment which might be used on the planned International Space Station, which NASA would like to begin work on with the Russians, the Europeans, the Japanese, and the Canadians in the next couple of years. It will take over 800 hours of spacewalks to build that space station as designed. NASA should be pleased with the way this spacewalk went. 7 months ago, 2 astronauts had to cut short a spacewalk on account of frozen fingers and toes. Sonia?
This time they were saying they were actually quite comfortable. What exactly is all the equipment? How did they manage to make it keep them warm?
Well, it's pretty simple. It's some battery-operated gloves. It has some heating filaments in the fingers, and there's some batteries up in the wrist area, and they just turn on the gloves and they keep them nice and warm. As far as the socks go, they're just a little more thermally active, and the long johns are a little thicker. And what was key was being able to turn off that cooling system, because they have cool water running through their suit. And up until this time, they haven't been able to turn it off. So if they got a chill, they really got a chill.
And what next is the plan for this? A few more days left on this
Well,
mission.
this is sort of the crowning achievement on this mission. They're due to land Monday morning at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, weather permitting.
Miles O'Brien, Miles O'Brien, thanks for that and bringing us up to date on the spacewalk, which is sort of coming to an end now. 2 astronauts there up in space in extremely cold temperatures. Well, now let's take a look at the latest weather conditions around the world. And with that, we're joined by CNN's Dave Hennon.
North American weather dominated by a couple of frontal systems across the eastern U.S. A lot of this is moisture left over from the Pacific Hurricane Ishmael, which got pushed quickly off to the east. Showers and thunderstorms expected in the drought-stricken regions of the northeastern U.S. So some good news with rain on the way in that region. That's an updated look at your world weather forecast.
I'm Sonia Riesler from All of Us. Thanks for joining us. We leave you now with pictures from that spacewalk.
Endeavour haben heute 6 Stunden lang außerhalb des Shuttles gearbeitet. Die Männer testeten Handschuhe und Werkzeuge, mit denen sie auch bei Temperaturen von 57 Grad unter Null filigrane Arbeiten im All durchführen können. Die Tests sind Vorbereitungen auf den Bau der Weltraumstation Alpha, der 1997 beginnen soll. An dem Projekt sind neben den USA auch Russland, Europa, Kanada und Japan beteiligt.
2 Amerikaanse astronauten wandelden 6 uur in de ruimte om nieuwe onderdelen van het ruimtepak uit te proberen. Het ondergoed zoals gezegd, maar ook nieuwe door batterijen verwarmde handschoenen. Bij de laatste ruimtewandeling van shuttle-astronauten in februari bevroren hun handen en moesten ze snel naar binnen vluchten. Dit keer bleven de handen en de overige lichaamsdelen lekker warm, melden de ruimtevaarders.
Spaziergang. Astronauten testen neue Schutzanzüge. Zu Testzwecken. 2 Astronauten an Bord der Endeavour haben das Raumschiff heute für einen 6,5-stündigen Ausflug ins All verlassen. Dabei sollen sie heizbare Handschuhe, Thermounterwäsche und neue Werkzeuge testen. All dies ist notwendig, um Astronauten auf die Arbeit in den eisigen Temperaturen vorzubereiten. Nach den Plänen der NASA soll im November 1997 mit der Konstruktion einer internationalen permanenten Beobachtungsstation im Weltraum begonnen werden. Im Februar diesen Jahres waren schon einmal 2 Astronauten zu einem Weltraumspaziergang gestartet. Sie mussten die Expedition jedoch bereits nach 3 Stunden abbrechen. Die Raumfahrer waren bei Temperaturen von -93 Grad Celsius dem Erfrieren nahe.
Shuttle Endeavour take a cold walk in space. NASA is satisfied with Saturday's spacewalk by two of its astronauts. They left the US Space Shuttle Endeavour for the rigors of cold, dark space. As CNN's Miles O'Brien reports, the two were equipped with newly heated gloves, thermal socks, boot inserts, and a lot more.
Cycle through the on-off, high, low switches.
It doesn't get much cooler than this. Kept at robotic arm's length in the shadow of the Space Shuttle Endeavour, spacewalking astronauts Jim Voss and Mike Gernhardt soaked up the sights and the brutal cold. But while it may have been 130 below in the void, inside their $10 million spacesuits, it was downright toasty.
And you do your thermal comfort number? 5 and 5.
The astronauts were checking out several improvements designed to make the trip outside the orbiter more comfortable. The pair outfitted with heated gloves, improved underwear and socks, and a new switch allowing them to kill the suit cooling system if they feel a chill.
The handling tools are extremely cold, yes, I can imagine.
The suit upgrade comes 7 months after astronauts Mike Foale and Bernard Harris had to cut short a spacewalk outside Discovery on account of frozen fingers and toes. During this venture into the void, Voss and Gernhardt also spent a lot of time working up a sweat, testing new tools, braces, and hardware, which might be used on the International Space Station.
It's a lot easier to take this off than it is to put it on.
Voss and Gernhardt also got a chance to grade an improved helmet lighting system and wrist-worn electronic checklist. Mike Gernhardt likened it to a midterm exam for NASA as it aims to begin building an International Space Station with the Russians in the next few years. You might call the course Space Station Construction 101.
Okay, I give the workset interface an A.
Miles O'Brien, CNN, reporting.
Cape Canaveral. Zwei Astronauten der US-Raumfähre Endeavour haben heute 6 Stunden lang außerhalb des Shuttles gearbeitet. Die Männer testeten Handschuhe und Werkzeuge, mit denen sie auch bei Temperaturen von 57 Grad unter Null filigrane Arbeiten im All durchführen können. Die Tests sind Vorbereitungen auf den Bau der Weltraumstation Alpha, der 1997 beginnen soll.
Wir hatten ja gestern schon über Marilyn gesprochen, der neue Hurrikan, der hier über die Antilleninseln hinwegzog. Und letzte Nacht und heute auch die Nordostküste von Puerto Rico mit maximalen Windgeschwindigkeiten von 177 Kilometern pro Stunde überquerte. Und so wie es jetzt aussieht, nimmt er Weg wieder auf Florida. Doch die neuesten Voraussagen gehen davon aus, dass er irgendwo hier über der Karibik nach Norden abdreht und Florida nicht erreicht. Hoffen wir, dass er das auch wirklich tut. In diesem Sinne wünsche ich Ihnen einen angenehmen Abend, schönen Sonntag. Bis Montag dann.
Raumwechsel. Die Astronauten der US-Raumfähre Endeavour, James Voss und Michael Gernhardt, wurden für 6 Stunden gut verpackt ins All geschickt. Die Mission heißt Außenbordeinsatz und ist ein Ausflug in 93 Grad minus. Neu entwickelte Thermounterwäsche, Spezialsocken und vor allem heizbare Handschuhe soll die Astronauten zu gut geschützten Raumhandwerkern machen. Eine Übung für die geplante Weltraumstation Alpha, mit deren Bau schon 1997 begonnen werden soll. Voss und Gernhardt aber dürfen am Montag erst einmal zurück zur Mutter Erde.
On board the Space Shuttle Endeavour are entering the final phase of their mission. On Saturday, the two astronauts tested everything from battery-warmed gloves to a toolbox filled with gadgets. The pair also braved some frigid temperatures outside Endeavour. But the astronauts say they were quite cozy inside NASA's new $10 million spacesuits. The tests paved the way for future astronauts to build an international space station. Endeavour is scheduled to land on Monday.
We take you around the globe checking the weather forecast across the
Pacific Rim in Asia, and Oscar continues to cause problems across most of the islands of Japan. As we speak, in fact, probably the brunt of the storm is being felt in Tokyo. 50-knot gusts plus are expected. They're already being received there. As well, about 70 millimeters of rain so far has fallen. More is very likely, probably double that anyway. It continues to promise to move north and east, and as it does so, the effects should be diminishing across most of Japan. Polly following somewhat in close pursuit, but we'll watch it carefully. It's still just tropical storm strength. Ryan losing intensity in the South China Sea, and 1B moving onshore, making more rain. And south and eastern United States, rain showers promised there. And farther north, first cool air and then cold air coming in from Canada across the western provinces of Canada, sinking farther south in the next couple of days across the central U.S. In the south and the west, down into Mexico, more rain showers are expected. North and western U.S. up into the western provinces of Canada, rain is in the forecast. About the best news I can give you. In the north and the east, there is rain also in the immediate future.
The crew of the Space Shuttle Endeavour did some fancy formation flying this week. On Thursday, the 5-man crew inched toward a smooth rendezvous with a science satellite which had been floating free of the shuttle since early Monday morning. During the 3 days it trailed the orbiter, the Wake Shield facility produced 4 exotic semiconducting films which may one day be used to make faster, more powerful computers. The satellite is so named because it creates a super vacuum in its wake, 10,000 times stronger than anything on Earth. The Wake Shield rendezvous was delayed a day because of a series of problems with the satellite's communication, power, and propulsion systems. But project scientists are calling the mission a success. Endeavour is scheduled to land at the Kennedy Space Center on Monday morning.
This is the man who plans to take it completely around the world, a first for a balloon. The Netherlands' Henk Brink won't be the first to try.
And they have failed now 5 times, and now it's my turn to try it.
The $4 million project is sponsored by scores of companies. Brink will advertise for them, but wants the focus of his flight to be humanitarian, a high-flying billboard for the world's children.
Of course, there are a lot of sponsors, but they are on the capsule, and UNICEF can have the balloon.
Before the flight leaves terra firma, Brink needed to test the balloon that will carry him and 2 crewmates to altitudes of 40,000 feet. He searched the world for a wind-free place to test.
It was not easy. We searched all Europe and Russia. We found an airship hangar from the Second World War just north of London.
But the hangar was 30 feet too short. So Brink called the only company in the world with a building big enough, NASA, with its vehicle assembly building.
We wanted to do this on a non-interference basis to our external tank and solid rocket booster processing.
NASA reps say they're glad to help, but not at taxpayer expense. After his mission, Brink will get a bill, probably for about $25,000. Bob Grover, Channel 6 News.
Brink hopes to launch the balloon sometime after November 1st.
Marilyn auf seinem unheilvollen Zug durch die Karibik. Bäume wurden entwurzelt, Strom- und Telefonleitungen zerstört. Der Flughafen ist nur noch für Militär- und Rettungsflugzeuge nutzbar. Tausende Menschen mussten ihre Behausungen verlassen. Einige Häuser wurden dem Erdboden gleichgemacht. Puerto Rico und die Jungferninseln sind inzwischen von Präsident Clinton zum Katastrophengebiet erklärt worden. Der befürchtete Übergriff Marilyns auf das amerikanische Festland ist jedoch ausgeblieben. Der Hurrikan hat auf die offene See abgedreht. Schwere Unwetter auch in Japan. Dort wütet Taifun Oscar. Nach Expertenmeinungen einer der stärksten Stürme, von denen Japan nach dem Zweiten Weltkrieg heimgesucht wurde. Mit Windgeschwindigkeiten von bis zu 180 Kilometern in der Stunde und schweren Regenfällen zieht er über die Inseln. Mindestens 20 Menschen erlitten Verletzungen. Im Großraum Tokio kam der öffentliche Personenverkehr nahezu zum Erliegen. Die Bewohner wurden aufgefordert, sich in ihren Wohnungen aufzuhalten. Für die Ostküste und die Mitte Japans wurden Sturm- und Flutwarnungen herausgegeben.
At the airport terminal at the St. Thomas Airport, the terminal building itself was almost completely gutted by the wind. We were told there was 4 feet of water in the building at the height of the storm.
North American weather, pretty good push of colder air moving from central Canada into the northern U.S. will bring some cooler temperatures behind it. High pressure already bringing some cool temperatures in through the eastern U.S. Well-needed rains in the northeastern U.S. will begin to subside somewhat as showers and storms continue in the southeast U.S.
Space Shuttle Endeavour is due to return home about 1 hour from now if the weather cooperates. Science experiments fill this 11-day mission. Astronauts released and retrieved 2 satellites, and Saturday 2 astronauts conducted a spacewalk to test new thermal clothing and tools intended for space station construction. Good weather is expected for this morning's landing at Kennedy Space Center, but there could be a problem with fog.
And here's the entry. This obviously is late in the entry. Ken had a great view of Houston as we came over it. By now, we're in the range of the long-range optics from the Cape. And this is approaching the hack turn. In fact, it's probably on the hack now. We made a right-hand turn entry to runway 33 at Kennedy Space Center. Kind of a personal triumph. I've been trying to land in my home state ever since my first mission. And the last 2 have gone to California, so we were glad to get back to Florida with this one. The weather was really good. We got great support from the entry team, making sure the weather was good and that all the facilities were good. And finally, returning to light at the Kennedy Space Center. Really, really enjoyed the whole flight, and the culmination of it here to land on Florida soil was really nice. There not being any place to land here in Texas. Chute came out. We hardly had to use the brakes because the chute worked really well. We had a little tailwind, so we rolled quite a ways, but we knew we were going to stop, so we took it easy on the brakes. And rolled down pretty close to where the convoy was and stopped.
At 69 knots, we jettison the drag chute, and you do it at a little bit of airspeed so that it pulls cleanly away from the engine bells, because this, after all, is a reusable spacecraft. It was the 9th space flight of Endeavour, the 71st space flight of the shuttle program.
And the second dog flight.
The second dog flight.
The canine-crazed crew of the Space Shuttle Endeavour obeyed their masters in Houston and came home after working like dogs in orbit for 11 days.
We've known all along we had a full plate, and we've been preparing for it, knowing that we were going to be extremely busy, hoping that we could accomplish everything that we'd set out to do, plus even some extra.
But from the outset, it appeared the dog crew, so named by their pooch-loving commander, Dave Walker, would not be lucky dogs. A pair of free-floating science satellites proved bulky at best. Near the end of its 2-day jaunt to learn more about the sun's corona, the Spartan satellite inexplicably shut down. Scientists will hold their breath until they can retrieve the onboard tape, which they hope contains their precious data.
Houston, step 1 is complete.
The other science package, the Wake Shield facility, left a series of problems in its wake. Designed to produce exotic semiconducting films, the satellite had to be shut down after it overheated. Given an extra day floating behind the shuttle to make up for the lost time, the satellite was able to manufacture 4 of the 7 semiconductors scientists set as a goal. Still, Commander Walker told me he would give the Wake Shield an A for effort.
I think it's a mistake to try and grade it too harshly. It's kind of like a brand new kid in the block. You want to give it a few tries before you start keeping score.
And for those who are keeping score, this scene has to rate as the hands-down highlight of the mission. Spacewalkers Jim Voss and Mike Gernhardt spent nearly 7 hours outside the orbiter testing new tools and techniques which might be used to build an international space station. They were also held at robot arm's length in the shadow of the shuttle to test some thermal underwear and heated gloves. Despite 130-degree below-zero temperatures, the astronauts reported the only thing cool was the view.
All I could see was water and clouds everywhere. It was just amazing to note that most of our world really is water, and I could see it all at the same time.
Endeavour lofted to orbit strapped to some newly modified solid rocket boosters. After the previous 2 launches, NASA engineers discovered hot exhaust burned through putty, singeing joint sealing O-rings. The booster rockets used in the Endeavour launch were plucked from the Atlantic and are still being examined. NASA will not try another launch, currently scheduled for the end of the month, until engineers are certain the fix is just that. Miles O'Brien, CNN, reporter.
Auf die Minute pünktlich ist heute Mittag die amerikanische Raumfähre Endeavour auf dem Weltraumbahnhof in Florida gelandet. 11 Tage lang waren die Astronauten im All. Höhepunkt der Reise war ein 6 Stunden langer Weltraumspaziergang. Dabei testeten 2 Astronauten neue Thermowäsche.
Herausgefordert wurden die Astronauten nicht nur, als sie sich als Klempner betätigen mussten, da ein Toilettenfilter verstopft war. Höhepunkt der Mission war der 6,5-stündige Aufenthalt der beiden Astronauten James Voss und Michael Gernhardt im All. Sie arbeiteten mit neuen Werkzeugen, die bei der Zusammensetzung einer internationalen Raumstation in den nächsten Jahren verwendet werden sollen. Erfolgreich auch die Landung. Pünktlich um 7:38 Uhr setzte die Raumfähre auf. Schon in 10 Tagen ist der nächste Shuttle-Start der Columbia für eine 16-tägige Forschungsmission geplant.
Fähre Endeavour im Anflug auf Cape Canaveral in Florida. Mit einer sicheren Landung wurde der pannengeplagte 11-tägige Flug der Raumfähre beendet. Nur mit Mühe konnten 2 Satelliten ausgesetzt und getestet werden, mit denen unter anderem die Solarwinde erforscht werden sollen. Erfolgreich dagegen war ein 6-stündiger Weltraumspaziergang verlaufen, bei dem die Astronauten Thermokleidung und Werkzeuge ausprobiert hatten. Beides Vorarbeiten für den in den nächsten Jahren geplanten Bau einer internationalen Raumstation.
In Hurricane-Skala hatte Marilyn nur die Stärke 2 erreicht. Kaum zu glauben für die Bewohner von St. Thomas. Der jüngste Hurrikan der Saison war in den Böen so stark, dass Segelyachten, ja selbst dieses ausgewachsene Schiff der Küstenwache aufs Land gesetzt wurden. 40% aller Häuser auf St. Thomas und der Nachbarinsel St. Croix, so die erste Bilanz, sind zerstört. Verletzte müssen nach Puerto Rico geflogen werden, denn auch der Operationssaal des Krankenhauses von St. Thomas wurde zum Opfer des Hurrikans. Erin, Felix, Louis, Marilyn, die Saison ist noch nicht vorüber und schon zählen die Meteorologen den 7. Hurrikan. Professor William Gray, hier im amerikanischen Frühstücksfernsehen, hatte die Stürme vorausgesagt. Seine Erklärung: Das Verschwinden der pazifischen El Niño-Strömung im Zusammenspiel mit überdurchschnittlichen Regenfällen in Westafrika und bestimmten Luftdruckgebieten und Wassertemperaturen lassen die tropischen Stürme im östlichen Atlantik entstehen. In der Karibik angekommen sind sie so stark, dass sie Tod und Verwüstung bringen.
Wieder toben 2 Hurrikans, diesmal allerdings auf der Pazifikseite von Mexiko. Der eine hier, der andere ist inzwischen auf dem Pazifik hinausgezogen. Und Marilyn folgte glücklicherweise den Vorhersagen und zog von Puerto Rico aus nicht mehr weiter Richtung Florida, sondern bog jetzt nach Norden ab. Wird dann allerdings die Bermudas jetzt gefährden. Hoffen wir, dass Marilyn dran vorbeizieht. Ihnen noch einen angenehmen Abend. Tschüss.
Wirbelsturm, der hier bei den Bermudas liegt. Er zieht im Laufe der Nacht im Westen an den Bermudas vorbei Richtung Nordosten. Aber diese Karte zeigt uns noch einen zweiten tropischen Wirbelsturm hier an der Westküste von Mexiko. Ein neuer tropischer Wirbelsturm. Aber beide sind weit weg von uns. Deshalb noch einen geruhsamen Abend.
Astronauten Reinhard Furrer. In Berlin gedachten zahlreiche Wissenschaftler des 54-jährigen Physikers und Universitätsprofessors. Furrer war am 10. September bei einer Flugschau in Berlin tödlich verunglückt. Bekannt wurde er als Wissenschaftsastronaut. 1985 war Furrer Bordmitglied der US-Raumfähre Challenger. Seither hatte er sich immer wieder für die Raumfahrt stark gemacht.
Hurricane Marilyn. Aber der Blick auf den übrigen Atlantik, der ist zum Glück beruhigend, denn da ist nichts, kein weiterer Sturm in Sicht. Und auch jenseits des Bildes Richtung Afrika, wo sich ja diese tropischen Wirbelstürme entwickeln, ist nichts in Sicht. Also bleibt nur die Hoffnung, dass die Hurricane-Saison für diese Saison zumindest beendet ist.
Western Europe's Ariane rocket blasted into space late Saturday from the European Space Center in French Guiana. 20 minutes after liftoff, the rocket placed a satellite into orbit for U.S. communications giant AT&T. The satellite will provide broadcast television signals throughout North America and the Caribbean. It replaces another satellite which exploded last year, minutes after it separated from an Ariane rocket.
just a couple minutes now, within the next 5 or 10 minutes, we should be getting pictures of the flight crew having a snack before breakfast. And we'll be standing by for those pictures. We're at T-minus 3 hours and holding. This is Shuttle Launch Control. This is Shuttle Launch Control. We now have the STS-69 flight crew. Got Mission Specialist Mike Gernhardt. He's flying for the first time today. He'll be one of the EVA crewmen. Jim Voss, also one who will be performing an EVA. Commander David Walker, flying for the 4th time. Pilot Ken Cockrell. And Mission Specialist Jim Newman, flying for the 2nd time today. If you'll notice, the crew has dog food bowls in front of them. They've dubbed themselves the Dog Crew, and they've had a lot of fun with that title. And each of them have a dog name, and this is just a fun thing that the crew's decided to do. This is Shuttle Launch Control. The countdown clock has now resumed counting at the T-minus 3 hour mark. Proceeding on with our launch count, leading up to a planned opening of our window at 11:09 a.m. Eastern Time. It's continuing to be a very quiet countdown, with the procedures and the activities outlined in the countdown procedure being checked off per the countdown clock. We're standing by to get live pictures of the astronauts at their crew quarters as they leave and board the astronaut van to go out to the launch pad. We have Commander David Walker and Pilot Ken Cockrell. This is Shuttle Launch Control. The STS-69 crew has now arrived at the 195-foot level at pad 39A. Mission Specialist Jim Newman now taking a picture of the rest of the crew. Crew will be walking across the orbiter access arm to get to the white room, which leads to the crew module.
Houston Endeavour, we're configured for air to ground 1 voice check.
Endeavour Houston for the CDR and PLT only. Com check on air to ground 1.
Houston Endeavour CDR, loud and clear. PLT, loud and clear.
Houston read CDR and PLT both loud and clear, and configure for air to ground 2.
Okay.
The orbiter's access arm will be retracted away from the vehicle.
Orbiter access arm retract.
This arm can be re-extended in just a few minutes if necessary. All items and concerns have been cleared up for launch today. Weather conditions again are go for launch, and we have no technical issues. Just past the T-minus 7-minute mark in our launch for Endeavour.
JRPS OTC, start the APU and hydraulic strip chart recorders.
Final purge underway of the main engines. Just a few seconds, a profile test of the orbiter's aero surfaces will be completed. And the three main engines are being gimbaled and positioned for launch. All systems are go for launch at this time, just a few minutes away from the 9th voyage of Endeavour with a crew of 5 on a multifaceted 11-day mission. Pilot will be closing their visors in the next few seconds at the T-minus 2-minute mark.
Caution warning, memory is clear, no unexpected errors. Copy. Flight crew, close and lock your visors, initiate O2 flow. Every dog has his day, and today is your day. On behalf of the launch team, we wish you good luck on your mission.
Thanks, Ben, and the dogs are ready to fly.
GLS is go for ET LH2 pressurization.
Just seconds before launch, thousands of gallons of water will be dumped on the launch platform to help suppress the sound and shock.
25.
12, 11, 10, 9. We have a go for engine start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Endeavour on the 71st flight of the Space Shuttle on a multifaceted mission.
Houston now controlling the flight of Endeavour.
Roger, roll, Endeavour.
Endeavour completes the roll to place the shuttle and heads down in the orbit position for the 8.5-minute round of orbit. Seconds into the flight, Endeavour's 3 liquid fuel main engines begin to throttle back in a 2-step fashion to 67% of rated performance. That will dampen the stress on the shuttle's aero surfaces as it breaks through the sound barrier. Seconds into the flight, Endeavour passes through the sound barrier. The main engines begin to rev back up to full throttle. All of the engines performing normally, along with Endeavour's 3 power-producing fuel cells and 3 hydraulic power units.
Endeavour, go at throttle up.
Endeavour, Roger, go at throttle up.
Throttle up call acknowledged by Commander Dave Walker. He's joined on the flight deck by pilot Ken Cockrell, flight engineer Jim Newman, and payload commander Jim Voss, mission specialist Mike Gernhardt, seated alone down on the middeck. 1 minute 35 seconds into the flight. Endeavour more than 88,000 feet in altitude, traveling more than 3,000 feet per second, already 13 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center on a due east trajectory. 1 minute 50 seconds into the flight, 15 seconds away from solid rocket booster separation. That will be confirmed by the booster officer here in Mission Control. Endeavour now 155,000 feet in altitude, more than 26.5 miles downrange. Booster officer confirms a good solid rocket booster separation.
Endeavour, performance nominal.
Endeavour, roger.
Houston, laser mark 288.
Copy.
Houston Endeavour, we have it.
Endeavour Houston, for Cujo, we copied your last about the low rate on Spartan when you came in during the fly around, and that from our initial assessment is consistent. That and the incorrect attitude of Spartan is consistent with the Spartan vehicle going into a minimum reserve power mode, sort of a shutdown, and after we've berthed Spartan, we're going to get you during the post-recovery config to give us statuses and possibly assess what might have happened.
Hey, thanks, Nanook. We're in the middle of berthing right this very instant, and we'll talk to you about that in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for calling. You can set it for TV05 and after wake shield grab.
Houston Endeavour, the wake shield is clear, and we've sent the SC2 repower command.
Copy, Endeavour.
Sound is done commanding. We'll be ready for the ADAX acquisition mode checkout.
Copy, Underdog. We have a couple more commands, and we'll be ready to turn it over.
All of the free fly or activation operations will continue at this point. The wake shield itself is called the free flyer. The other component of the wake shield facility is its carrier platform in the cargo bay.
and that is expected with the wheel speed. And prior to getting into grapple range, we'd like safe hold.
Okay, safe hold.
This view from a payload bay camera in the rear of Endeavour's cargo bay, showing the robot arm being extended towards the wake shield facility for a grapple. Flight controllers here are watching the attitude control system on the wake shield very carefully, making sure it is as stable as possible at the time that the end effector reaches the grapple fixture on the satellite. Everything has gone pretty much by the book this morning. A flawless rendezvous by Commander Dave Walker and pilot Ken Cockrell to get Endeavour back into position to conduct a series of jet thruster firings upon the wake shield facility from distances of 290 and 200 feet. Unofficially, a total of 14 jet thruster firings were conducted to gather valuable data on heat, pressure, and forces impinged upon the free-flying satellite by the orbiter's jet thrusters. Astronaut Jim Newman at the aft flight deck of Endeavour, now slowly moving the robot arm in for the capture of the wake shield facility to complete 3 days of free flight. Payload controllers here very happy with the performance of wake shield. It is a very stable satellite. The orbiter now in so-called free drift, no jet thruster firings anymore as Jim Newman moves the robot arm carefully in for the grapple of the wake shield.
This is Mission Control Houston. As Endeavour flies over the Gulf of Mexico, it holds the wake shield facility in place on the end of the shuttle's robot arm. The other of the two free-flying satellites that were deployed and retrieved by Endeavour during this flight, the Spartan spacecraft, can be seen in the payload bay in this particular camera view.
A off, B out on the right pod.
Thank you.
In this view from the rear payload bay cameras housed in Endeavour, this is the wake side of the wake shield facility, the side on which the carousel is located, and the growth of these thin film epitaxial materials has been conducted over 3 days of free flight. The arm now in motion, ready to rebirth the wake shield facility back into the payload bay. Jim Newman at the controls of the shuttle's robot arm, ready to place that 4,300-pound satellite back into its carrier. In this view of Endeavour's payload bay, we see the Wake Shield facility being maneuvered very slowly back into its berthed position, and its cross-bay carrier mounted directly behind the Spartan spacecraft, which was the first of the 2 satellites to be deployed and successfully retrieved by the 5-member crew on board Endeavour.
You're loud and clear, Houston, and just a status report. DB2 is in his suit, putting on his gloves right now, and DB1 is halfway there, waiting on a little room, and then we'll be both suited up.
Copy, Doc Face. Endeavour Houston, for Middeck TV, we have an upcoming glow test at 15:53. We'd appreciate it if we could configure for glow television.
And with the closing of the hatch, the astronauts shortly will begin the 15-minute procedure to depressurize the airlock to 0, at which time the pressure in the airlock will be equivalent to the vacuum of space, and then they'll get the go-ahead to open up the hatch and begin the 6.5-hour spacewalk to test thermal modifications made to their spacesuits, as well as some of the tools and some of the key techniques of minute dexterity and the handling of small screws, tools, connectors at a work site in the payload bay, which will ultimately be mimicked in the assembly of the International Space Station.
Easy. Don't pull too hard. Yeah, I'll hold it. Hold it where I get this. Okay. Test check clear. That goes. There you go. A little higher. There you go. We got it. Okay, I've got both debris shield tools in. Both feathers are off. Ready? Go. Okay, I'm releasing it.
Gernhardt is removing this shield.
I've got the shield. Debris shield going back in. We're ready to go to the forward bulkhead. Okay, back to the forward bulkhead. I'll meet you there.
Again, a test of the dexterity of Mike Gernhardt as he stands in a portable foot restraint at the end of Endeavour's robot arm. The shield is 0.063 inches in thickness, made of aluminum.
Put a rigid tether. He's tethering off the shield right now. Yeah. I just had to move it to stretch it out tight. Okay. That's good.
The comfort level is measured in a scale from 2 to 8.
The big boy, and put him on the rigid tether.
2 being the coldest acceptable condition, 8 being the hottest acceptable condition.
Thank you. I thought I had them off, but I guess there was one still on. So you're doing good, Pluto. Let me know when you want a GCA. I'm going to be doing the MLI removal.
Again, in your picture, astronaut Jim Voss out over the starboard sill of the payload bay, he wearing the suit with the red stripes.
Okay, there's the MLI folded in half. If I would rate that task a B, difficult to get it off the crafters at the top just because of clearance. I would recommend I get a little bit more clearance around the corners. The actual handling of the MLI is fine. I would rate that an A. Copy all. Then I'm going to put it back together and then stow it.
Again, Gernhardt manipulating multi-layer insulation blanketing at the work site along the starboard side of the payload bay, the type of insulation that will cover space station modules.
I put a pretty substantial torque into it, and it still holds in the soft dock.
Right above Voss's head right now is the Spartan Solar Science satellite, which a week ago at this moment was free flying from Endeavour.
The Noble handrail goes on about the same. The top dock is not acceptable the way it is. It wants to come off. I have to compensate excessively. I don't even consider it really a soft dock. I'm almost like I'm holding it in place. It doesn't restrain it very well at all. And then I can easily lock it in place, and once it's locked into place, or the actual locking in place is quite easy. Okay, I got the handhold removed, put it back on. Yeah, that was perfectly fine. The soft dock, space load, I give it an A.
Okay.
Just hitting with down, up.
As Endeavour crosses the west coast of Africa at an altitude of about 214 statute miles, Jim Voss being lowered back toward Endeavour's payload bay after conducting some thermal evaluations of his spacesuit.
We're just placing the NOI.
Is reattaching a debris shield to the task board on which a number of tool handling techniques were evaluated during today's spacewalk.
And method of grounding here, using the, put it, can you raise me up about a foot, using the 3 stiff wires and the little wing nut is a D. Difficult hand. Okay, that's released. And we have it around. Right up here to this one. There. There. Send it to me and I'll mount up here. I got it? Yeah, you got it. Okay, I've got it. Let go. There it follows.
EV2 Mike Gernhardt now working at removing the thermal cube.
Looking marvelous. We're a little behind the timeline, but we're getting there.
There you go. To the airlock, please.
That thermal cube was providing objective data as to the temperatures that were being experienced by the 2 crew members as they worked outside in Endeavour's payload bay. In addition to that objective data recorded on the thermal cube, the astronauts also reported their own subjective feelings on a scale ranging from 2 to 8, with 2 being cold and 8 being hot. And now Jim Newman on board Endeavour, maneuvering Jim Voss toward the airlock so that he can restow both this multi-layer insulation blanket and the thermal cube that he holds in his hand as the astronauts continue configuring Endeavour and cleaning up the payload bay at the final portions of today's spacewalk. And we are currently at the 6-hour mark of that spacewalk, just slightly behind the timeline.
Commander Dave Walker now has taken over manual control, flying Endeavour around the heading alignment circle.
Endeavour, you are on energy at the 180.
Endeavour, roger.
Walker is negotiating a banking right-hand turn of 237 degrees, now halfway around that turn. The early morning sunlight glistening off the tiled belly of the orbiter as it aligns itself with runway 33 in a landing on the southeast to northwest strip, the 3-mile-long landing strip at the Kennedy Space Center. On final approach, Endeavour will be descending at an angle 7 times steeper than that of a commercial jetliner.
Endeavour, you are on at the 90.
Endeavour, roger.
Commander Dave Walker will be flaring up the shuttle's nose just prior to touchdown and just prior to the deployment of the landing gear by pilot Ken Cockrell. Endeavour now less than 2 minutes from touchdown.
Runway in sight, Houston.
Copy, Endeavour, runway in sight.
Endeavour now aligned with runway 33 at the Kennedy Space Center. Wings are level, the shuttle very stable. Less than a minute from touchdown. Walker beginning to flare up the nose. Touchdown. Cockrell now deploying the drag chute. Nose gear touchdown. Endeavour rolling out on runway 33 at the Kennedy Space Center to complete a 4.5 million mile mission, the 71st in shuttle program history.